I'm now deep into day 2 of the WSOPE Main Event in Prague. Out of 2,617 entries, 709 players remain, with only 393 getting paid. First place is 2 million euros. I've built up an above average stack of 295k in chips as the field continues to thin rapidly. My last table just broke and I've been reassigned to a new table with all new opponents. So the blinds are 2k, 4k. In this first hand, I'm in the small blind and look down at King Queen offsuit. It folds around to the player in the cutoff, who opens to 8k. I looked over at his stack. I did have him covered slightly, but the big blind to my left had me covered. I don't want to play this hand at a position against two players. I decide to 3-bet to 40k. The big blind does fold, but the cutoff asks for a count on my stack, which he's entitled to since my stacks weren't neatly stacked in 20s. But I do think we have to be careful giving away any tells, as some opponents will purposely ask you this question to see how you're going to respond. I think the best thing to do is to just not say anything, and instead just rearrange your stack in a way so it's clear to everyone on how much you have. He thinks about it for a bit and does decide to put in the call. We go heads up to the flop of 5 of hearts, 9 of spades, king of spades. Appears to be a decent flop in my hand. I flop top pair and I decide to start with a c-bet of 22k. Cutoff thinks about it for a bit and decides to put in the call. The turn is the jack of diamonds. I now pick up a gut shot to the straight, but this is also a card that improves my opponent's range quite a bit. Hands like queen 10, king jack, jack 9. I decide to check to see what my opponent does. He thinks about it for a bit and decides to put in a substantial bet of 40k. I look at what he has behind. After he puts out the bet, it was about a quarter of his stack. And so it was definitely concerning, as I don't think he would use this size if he was planning to check back the river. It appeared like he was clearly trying to build a pot, but heads up with top pair and a gut shot, I'm not going anywhere. I decide to put in the call. The river comes the ace of diamonds. I check it over to him. The front door flush draw missed, but if he does have ace X, he's now hit top pair and outdrawn my pair of kings. He really takes his time here. This is definitely not a fun spot. The pot is huge. The shove ended up being for 135k, so I counted up my stack to see what I'd be left with if I called and lost. I'd be left with about 10 big blinds if I made the wrong call here. For the amount that he shoved for, I think his hand is quite polarized, and I also don't think he'd bet ace 5 of spades or ace jack of spades like this on the turn. But could he be bluffing with a hand like 6-7 of spades, 6-7 of hearts? What made it tougher was just being moved to this table and not having any information about his play, not seeing any of his showdowns, and not having the last few hours to collect any data about him. So aside from the 3 combos of queen 10 of hearts, clubs, and spades, his other likely value hands are pocket 5s, pocket 9s, and pocket jacks. And I think at some low frequency, he also could have ace king and decided to just call my 3-bet pre-flop to keep in my bluffs. I ultimately decided that aside from some missed flush draws, there's just too many value hands he could have, and just not enough data for me to think that he would decide to choose this runout to pull off a big bluff. Especially with this particular river, that's supposed to hit my range quite a bit. So in the end, I do decide to fold to live another day. This next hand is a sick one. I'm in the small blind and look down at pocket queens. The blinds are now 3k, 5k. There's an open raise from the player under the gun to 10k. It folds around to the player on my right who's on the button. He decides to 3-bet to 27k. I looked at his stack. He had about 120k, so I had him covered, but the under the gun player has us both covered. Now this is a really gross spot. I obviously have to worry not only about the 3-better, but also the under the gun raiser. I think in this spot, both players' ranges should be pretty tight. But also, one of the more important pieces of information that I haven't mentioned yet is who this player is under the gun. That's Paul Newey, who's a longtime fixture and an OG, especially in the European poker scene. He's highly respected, and I remember watching him play in some of the biggest televised cash games back in the day. The chances of the European pros on this table not knowing who he is are extremely low. For this pro on my right to be 3-betting, I feel like he must have an exceptionally strong hand, especially when Paul's under the gun. I just really don't think that my queens here are good against both players. I think best case scenario, I'm flipping against ace-king. I can't remember the last time I folded queens pre-flop, but I do decide to trust my read and throw away my hand here. Unfortunately, Paul folds as well. I wasn't able to see what both players had. In this next hand, I'm under the gun +1 and look down at pocket 10s. The player to my right under the gun opens to 10k. And here is where I think I made a mistake. I decided to just flat the 10k. Even though this player is opening under the gun, I think just calling here versus his stack size is too risk averse. In the last few orbits, he had lost a few small pots and is down to about 75k. I'm giving players behind me really good odds to come in, and pocket 10s really don't play well multi-way. The player to my left in the low jack does decide to make the call. We go 3 ways to the flop of 5 of spades, 4 of diamonds, 8 of clubs. The under the gun player checks. With an overpair on the board, and with lots of overcards that my hand needs protection from, I decide to put out a bet of 12k. The low jack thinks about it for a bit and makes the call. The under the gun player folds, and we go to the turn, which is the jack of clubs. I think my opponent could have a variety of hands here. Hands like ace-x suited, pocket 4s through pocket 9s. So while I am ahead of a significant portion of his range, I do have to proceed cautiously here. I decided to check. He thinks about it for a bit and eventually does decide to bet for 16k. So a relatively small bet compared to the pot. Perhaps he was trying to buy a cheap showdown by setting his price on the turn and hoping I'd check the river to him. I do put in the call for 16k. The river is the ace of hearts. I go ahead and check. Not the best river, as I'm now losing to all the ace-x combos, ace 4, ace 5, ace 3, ace deuce. I was really hoping that he'd check back, but instead he goes into the tank and thinks about it for a long time. I decided to just snap muck here. I had already made up my mind while he was taking so long on the river that I was folding if he was able to shove. It's been a really frustrating last couple levels, starting from the 3-bet pot with king-queen offsuit, where I folded to the shove on the river, then folding pocket queens pre-flop, which was just a brutal spot, and then to my pocket 10s this hand, where I'm struggling to find any hands I can beat, and again have to fold to the shove. With all 3 hands, my opponent is telling me the story that they have the best hand. Calling off your stack and being wrong sometimes is an inevitable part of poker, but I just felt like I was beat each time. But it's also in these moments where you also do start second guessing yourself, thinking if you're just getting run over by playing too weak. The blinds are now up to 3k, 6k, and we're starting to get closer to the bubble with 85 players away. Those last 3 hands have crippled me quite a bit, as I'm now down to 12.3 big blinds. But it's definitely not over. I've made bigger comebacks with much fewer chips. In this one, I'm in the big blind and pick up king jack suited. My good buddy to my left under the gun opens to 13k. Paul Newey is under the gun +1 and makes the call. It folds around back to me, and of course I put in the call as well. We go 3 ways to the flop of deuce of hearts, 5 of hearts, 9 of spades. I missed this flop, but I do still have a backdoor straight draw and flush draw. I check to the razor, who also decides to check. The action is on Paul, who decides to check back as well. The turn is the queen of spades, one of the best cards in the deck that doesn't give me a pair. With 74k left, while I still have some fold equity, I think this is a good spot for an overbet shove, and my hand does block some combination of queens that they could have. So I do decide to move all in. Luckily, after I do, both of them fold relatively quickly, and I'm able to pick up some much needed chips. Not long after winning that pot, I'm on the button and look down at ace-queen offsuit. A great position to be holding such a strong hand. Everybody folds to the cutoff to my right, who opens to 12k. I have 119k, just under 20 big blinds. I do have the cutoff covered by a little bit, and facing this open, I think this is a perfect spot to shove, as I expect him to call off with some worse hands. Folds around back to him, and unfortunately he snap calls. His kings hold, and it ended up being 81k. Now leaving me with crumbs at 38k, which is 6.3 big blinds. With this stack, I can't afford to wait too long. The blinds are coming around in a few hands. I just need one double up, get back into the game. So in the next hand, I'm in the cutoff and look down at King 7 of spades. Everybody folds to me. With a suited king here, this hand is good enough to shove to try to win the blinds.
All in.
The button to my left does make the call. The blinds get out of the way, and he turns over ace 5 of diamonds. There's no help on the flop when it comes deuce 6 deuce. The turn is 5, and the river is a 10. I've been eliminated from the main event, 81 players away from the money. After I busted, I did ask my neighbor what he had in the hand where I folded queens. He told me that he had aces. So even though I still busted out soon after that hand, hearing that I made the correct fold in that hand felt really good. This main event has reminded me on how quickly things can flip in this game. In one stage of the tournament, you could have all the momentum, everything is going your way, then suddenly everything changes. But as poker players, we've all experienced this again and again. We just accept it, learn from our mistakes, and keep making the best decisions we can. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to travel to this side of the world to compete and take a shot at my first WSOP Europe. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I appreciate all the love and support from everyone. Best of luck at the tables. See you soon in the next one.
喜欢我的影片，不要忘记按赞、订阅、打开小铃铛。